Café com Tri, a sua dose de triatlon.
Pega o seu café e vem com a gente.
Hello, I'm Bethany Trini and I'm here with Erika Magrisi and Wagner Espadotto for another episode of Café com Tri. How are you guys?
Hey, what's up? I'm not sure if I'm supposed to do this in English or in Portuguese. Olá, galera! Fala aí. Se prepara aí para um episódio bom.
Well, today we'll have the honor of hosting a chat with one of the greatest triathletes of all time. After all, in 15 years as a professional triathlete, he won 10 times the Nice Triathlon in France, was the world champion in Avignon, France, 1989, third place in Kona, 1983, second place in Kona in 86 and 87, and six-time world champion in Kona in 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, and 95. So, welcome to our podcast, Mr. Mark Allen.
Hey, great to be here with you guys. Yeah.
Can you please insert the
much.
clapping?
Yes, we need to insert some applause in here.
Well, for starters, there's no need to introduce yourself, but I'd love to know how you got into sports and what really led you to triathlon. How did you get there?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, when I was a kid and I was 10 years old, it was the first time, it was in 1968, and I was watching the Mexico City Olympics. It was the first Olympics that I'd ever seen. It was the first really sporting event where I got to see all of these different things that were not the main sports that we see here in the United States. And so, you know, you got to see gymnastics and got to see running and got to see swimming. And the distance swimmers were what captured my imagination because, you know, they were going back and forth in that 50-meter pool. And for me, as a 10-year-old, there's no way I could have even made 50 meters without stopping, maybe 25 without stopping. But and I couldn't believe how strong they were in the water. And just about a few weeks after that, there was a swim team in my town where I was growing up in Palo Alto, California. And they were having age group tryouts. They said, if you want to come swim, try it, and maybe you can be on the team. And my mom said, why don't you go and try out? And I said, I can't even swim one lap. And she goes, just go. You might surprise yourself. And so I went, and sure enough, I was able to go 100 yards without stopping. And that actually ended up becoming the first sport that I did. I was a competitive swimmer from the time I was 10 all the way through university, age 22. But I was very... I was very average as a swimmer. You know, I wasn't a world champion. I never even was fast enough to make it to the Olympic trials. And so I just sort of thought that, you know, I'm kind of like this average guy, which I am as a swimmer, you know. But 2 years after college, again, I was watching a sports program, Wide World of Sports, here in the United States. And it was in February of 1982. Again, I was 24 years old, 2 years out of college. I didn't really know what I was going to do for a career. I had a degree in biology, but I just didn't have a direction in my life. And so anyway, I turned on the sports channel, and here's this thing called the Ironman. And I'm thinking, what is an Ironman? And the announcer said the distances of the swim, the bike, the run, you know, in our measurements, 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, and then a marathon. And I thought, how many days does it take these people to do that crazy event? I thought it was 3 or 4 days, right? And he goes, no, they started
for sure.
Bob Babbitt, when you talked to Bob Babbitt, he said the same.
Yeah, you know, it's like I was used to going 100 and 200 backstroke, 200 yards, 200 meters, boom, that was long distance for me. And so anyway, I watched that program, and I just saw these, what looked like very ordinary, normal looking people crossing that extraordinary finish line. And a few weeks later, I thought, I have to go there and see if I can just be one of those finishers. And so 10 months later, I was on the start line of the Ironman. You didn't have to qualify back then. There were only about 1,000 people in the race. And so all you did is just call up the Ironman office. They sent you the application, you sent it back in, and away you go. And so I was just going to do that race one time. I did a couple short distance events in that summer trying to understand what it meant to put a swim, a bike, and a run together. You know, there were no coaches back then. It was just kind of throwing stuff out there and seeing what I could do. And there were a lot of athletes in the race that were good. Clearly, the guy to beat that year was Dave Scott. He had won the race once, and he was hoping to win his second title that October in 1982. And the wild thing, though, is that when I came out of the swim, I was in second place. And the guy that was leading just in front of me was Dave Scott. And I came out of the water and somebody said, "You're in second place." And I'm like, there's no way I'm in second place. I'm a terrible swimmer. You must have miscounted, at least third or fourth. There's no way I'm in second. And I looked, and there was nobody ahead of us. And I'm like, oh my God. And I didn't know who was right in front of me. And so I kind of ran up real quick to see who it was. And I saw that it was Dave Scott. And I was like, oh my God, I'm with the best guy in the sport. Back then he was the best guy at Ironman distance racing. And we headed out for the bike ride, and halfway through the bike ride, we had put about 5 minutes on the next competitors. I was still with him at the turn halfway through at Javi. And we rode a little bit further together, and I pulled up next to him at one point because I'd never talked to him. You don't run into Dave Scott on the street. He's like a superhero kind of a guy. And I pulled up next to him, and we're biking, and I go, "Hey, Dave, when we're done with the bike, do you want to go for a run?" And he looks at me like, "What are you talking about?" Anyway, so he put his bike into a big gear and he took off. And so I thought, all right, conversation with the champ is over. And I clicked my bike into a big gear, and I heard this just terrible grinding sound. And I looked down, and part of my derailleur had broken off and was dragging on the ground. And so off-road Dave Scott, he won his second Ironman title that year in 82. I didn't finish the race, which was my one and only goal, but I had been with the best guy in the world for a lot of hours of racing. And so that was really where the dream was born, that maybe if I take my time to gain fitness, gain experience, learn what it means to race in Hawaii, I could be the champion. And that's where everything really started for me.
I mean, you went from 0 to an Ironman in 10 months? Was that
months,
it?
Yeah.
And I think the way that it happened was that, I had 12 years of competitive swimming. So I had that cardiovascular engine.
Yeah, not zero.
Clearly.
Yeah.
That was built. That was already in place. But if you look at my body and compare it to the guys that were in the finals in the Olympics in Tokyo, I'd look like a little boy. They're huge, and their arms are long, and their feet and hands are huge, and they have this incredible flexibility in their shoulders. I don't have any of that. But if you look at my body compared to a cyclist or a runner, I look more like they do. And so I had the cardiovascular engine from all those years swimming, and now the way my body's put together, I was going into two sports that were just very natural and felt very easy for me to pick up quickly. And so it was a good combination.
Oh, yeah. You've been to Brazil to compete in the past. At the time, what was your impression of triathlon here in Brazil? And what do you think of the Brazilian athletes currently competing?
Well, Brazil was one of the first countries that I competed in outside of the United States. And it was great because everybody was so excited down there. And, you know how it is every year when they have the Parade of Nations in Kona. There's some nations, all the athletes get together in the parade and they have the flag, and some nations are pretty quiet and they're like, yay. And the Brazilians are like, so they are, you guys are definitely enthusiastic. And, I trained with a number of the top Brazilian pros who would come up to the United States, like Fernanda Keller, and competed against Leandro Macedo and a lot of athletes at the time that were really, really incredible. And I had a very hard time when I would go down there to Brazil to race because, when somebody's racing in their country and they know that this guy is coming from outside, that might be their one chance to beat him. And so the competition was very, very, very tough. And people would think, oh, you're going down to Brazil, it's going to be easy. No, it was not easy. So anyway, I just loved I always felt so welcome when I came down there. And it was just so fun to be around triathletes they were serious when they competed, but then they had a good time afterwards.
Yeah, that sounds like us.
Yes, really.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not sure if you had the chance to talk to any of the Brazilians during the Super League. Wow, I lost the name.
Super League
Fama
final
was
in
there. Who
Malibu.
else was there?
well, there's Vitória Lopes, and from Brazil this time, I think only Vitória Lopes in this time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to be at any of the Super League events. I would like to go at some point because they're pretty exciting format.
Yeah.
And I did a series of races the very last year that I competed in 1996, and they were very similar to Super League in that you had different heats and different distances and mixing the order up, and but it was all done outside on, it wasn't done in a stadium kind of format. I think it's a pretty exciting thing that they have going.
Mark, I always use a quote I read in the interview with you, which you say that there's no perfect race, but there's a way to do perfectly a race under the conditions that it presents yourself. So until your first achievement in Kona, it seemed that you have difficulties to find yourself at the island, and more in the mental aspect than the physical, because you have won Nice every year. And every time you come to Kona, there's always something that happened. And tell us a little bit more about how you tackle the mental game and your race preparation, and what tips do you give to athletes that are going through similar problems?
Every athlete goes into a competition kind of with their plan of how they want to do the race. And maybe if you're trying to win your age group or trying to win the event overall, like I was, you know that there's going to be a few athletes who might be the toughest challengers. And so you figure out, okay, what do I need to do to beat this person, to be ahead of that one? And you can have your strategies, but in a long race like the Ironman in Hawaii especially, the day might unfold very differently than you plan. And none of your strategies are going to be the one that are going to get you across the line in first place. And that if that is the realization of how the day is going, you have to come up with a different strategy in the race, on the spot, when you see somebody else pulling away and you're not feeling good. And some athletes, including me, can get stuck in that moment of going, I can't do it. They're so strong. I'm not strong enough. My legs are killing me. I'm hot. I'm running out of energy. I didn't train right. All that negative mental talk. And so there were a couple things that I needed to change about that to go from almost winning Kona to actually winning in Kona. One of them was to be willing to just deal with something that was completely unexpected that I hadn't planned on. And when I was ready to do that, then when something came up that was like completely unexpected, I was like, okay, there it is. There's the first one. And there's probably going to be a few more that are going to be like that. How do I get past this situation? How do I make it through this moment? How do I get back into my rhythm and have my best race? And that was very hard, because when the race isn't going the way you plan, sometimes it's easy to just kind of give up, or to get completely freaked out, and then you're completely stressed out, and then you can't just relax and do what you're trained to do. The second thing was that sometimes in those difficult, impossible looking moments where your dream feels completely out of reach, sometimes you can't come up with the answer right there in that moment. It might take you 10 more minutes or another hour or another 2 hours of racing before you actually come up with the answer of, okay, this is how I can turn this race around. And so what do you do in that long stretch of time? You can be sitting there freaking out, have all that mental chatter going on. I mean, you've probably experienced this if you've done any races. It's like everything's fine and wonderful and you're happy, and all of a sudden something happens and you're like, I don't like this. I want to quit.
Almost every time.
That emotional roller coaster, right?
Yeah, it's like you feel good, you feel terrible. You feel good, you feel terrible. And so in those moments where you can't come up with a solution, the second thing that I had to learn how to do was to just get my mind to be quiet, to just go, okay, there's that quiet space. And when you're quiet, you don't need to feel good to keep going. And if something's challenging, you don't have to have the answer right then. And it brings you back into the moment that you're in right there. You take the next pedal stroke, you take the next foot, you take the next foot strike in the run. You just keep going minute after minute after minute. And then eventually in that quiet, sometimes the answer does come. And I'll tell a story about that later. The third thing that I had to do, and this might be kind of unique to me, but in the early years that I was competing in Kona, Dave Scott was the guy that was winning the race, right? And so I thought, okay, he knows how to do it. I don't know how to do it. Let me be like Dave Scott. And one of the things that Dave always liked to do was to have this presence, like he was stronger than everybody else, and he was going to control the race, and he wanted to get out in front and go at his pace and make sure that everybody else followed his strategy of how the race should go. And so when I got to Kona, I tried to become like that, oh, I'm so strong. I'm going to win the Ironman this year. And finally in 1989, as I was getting ready to go over there, I thought, you know what? The best races I have are when I just go into the race with my 3 or 4 or 5 strategies of how I'm going to have a good day, but then be patient enough to just let the day unfold, and then just to respond to the day as it was taking place.
And do your race, not another person's race.
Yeah, do my race, but at the same time, be willing to adapt my race based on what's happening on that day. So maybe one race, I might have to go a little harder on the bike than I think. Or another race, I might have to just be a little more patient on the run so that I have a sprint at the end, or whatever it is. And so in 1989, I just went there to the big island of Hawaii. And I went to this little sacred place along the ocean, and I left some offerings for the island, and I said, let me just be here with my strength. I have a much calmer way of focusing, and when I'm calm, then I'm focused in the right way. When I'm pumped up, like Dave was, that takes a lot of energy, and I didn't race the best I could that way. And so anyway, I just asked the island, let me just be able to be there with my calm, with the way I like to race, and then help me to have the best race that I can. And so that's what I did. And as you know, that was the first year that I ended up winning. But it felt like it took all the pressure off of having to be something that I wasn't. Dave Scott won 6, I won 6. The way he won it was very different than the way I won it. So there's many ways to have your best race, but you have to figure out, how are you going to have your best race? Maybe it's taking one or two pieces of something you see from somebody else and putting it into your race strategy. But at the same time, if it's completely different than who you are as a human being, it's not going to work.
And do you believe that 89 was your best race in Kona?
Well, I have 2 races that I think were my best, and for very different reasons. The first, for sure, was 1989, because that was a win that took 7 years to put together. It wasn't like I just trained hard that year and finally came and won it. I was training hard for 7 years straight to finally win it. And so there were so many years of disappointment where after the race was over, where I'd been in the lead at the end of the bike, I'd been in the lead early in the run, late in the run, and still lost. I had to go back home and look at myself and say, okay, you thought you were ready, but you weren't. How am I going to improve on what I did this past year? Because you always feel like you've done everything you can, right? You don't go into Ironman thinking, oh, there's 20 other things I would have done. So you go into it feeling like I did everything possible to be the best I could be. And if it's not enough, it's hard to go back home and go, okay, let me train another whole year for this thing. So anyway,
do that for 7 years, 6 years straight is tough mentally.
Yeah. And so I had a lot of talks with myself to bring myself back each year and to refocus. What was my purpose? What was I trying to bring to the race? How was I going to make myself a little bit better physically? How was I going to become more prepared mentally? And so, clearly 1989 was an amazing race to win, not only because I won for the first time, but just the way it happened, where Dave and I were together for 8 hours of racing. And then to just barely beat him, I won by 58 seconds. That's such a small amount of time in a race that takes 8 hours to complete. But I would say probably the greatest race Ironman of my career was my final win in 1995. And the reason that I say that is that on that day, I had more moments where I was ready to give up and quit because victory seemed completely impossible. And there were so many moments where I didn't feel my best. And so it's easy to stay in the race and feel competitive when you feel like you're at your best. It can be very hard to stay in it, giving 100% of what you have to give when you feel like your body's only working at 80% or 70% or 60% of what you feel like you should be able to put out. And in that race in 95, that's the way it was. I had so many moments where I wanted to quit. And so like one of them, a big moment that probably everybody's heard about, is when I finished the bike ride, I came in 5th place and I was 13 and a half minutes behind the leader, who was Thomas Hellriegel. I was 37, he was 24. Nobody had won at that point in time as a 37-year-old. So I was trying to do something that nobody had done before. A 13 and a half minute lead that he had, nobody had closed that big of a gap to come back to be the champion. And so I had a number of impossible things facing me when I started that marathon. And it was actually really hard to get out of the transition area because I thought, I can't do it. 13 and a half minutes is too much time. I've won 5 of these. I don't need to run a marathon to finish in 5th or 10th or 50th. And I wasn't feeling that good. And in fact, when I got off the bike and heard I was 13 and a half minutes behind Thomas Hellriegel, I go, this is the worst Ironman of my entire career. I had never come off the bike that far behind the leader before. But I said, I've done all of this training. I have so many people who have helped me get here. I need to at least honor their commitment to me, because today is my time to honor my commitment, which is to just get out there and do the best I can. And so I started running, and there were a lot of points where I wanted to quit, where I wanted to give up, but each time I kept trying to pull myself back. And there's many stories about that day. You can actually read them. There's a great website. It's called 1989thestory.com. And the CEO of my company, Mark Allen Sports, his name is Scott Zagarino. He came up with the idea. He got Dave Scott and I to write 10 episodes of our journey through that year of 1989.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've read.
Yeah, and so I talk about that. And then at the very end of that, I also go fast forward to 1995 and explain why I think that's also perhaps one of my 2 best races ever. And of course, I did pull back that time on Hellriegel. I caught him at mile 23 of the marathon, with less than 5K to go, and went on to win that final title of my career. And it was very difficult, but because it was so difficult, it was also perhaps the most satisfying. And you know how that is. Every single person listening has had to overcome something that seemed impossible for them. Maybe it was in sport, maybe it was in life. And nobody else will really understand how difficult it was for you to keep going and to make it through to the other side, where you brought something to completion, where you maybe finished that race, where you held on to a relationship and made it work, where you stuck with your kids when they were not being good, or maybe just something with yourself personally that you wanted to change for years and finally you've done it.
I think that's much of what Ironman teaches us. That's resilience in life and also in sports. I see that very much on all the triathletes who really put themselves out to do a good race. I see that people are usually very resilient to everything in life.
Resilient, flexible, and it's not even about being committed necessarily. It's more just about taking each moment and continuing to go forward a little bit. No great Ironman race is made in one training session. Obviously, it takes months and years, and each little piece gets you a little bit closer to having that great race. And it's the same with anything in life. You're like, when you're raising your children, they don't go from day one to being 21 years old in 2 days. It takes 21 years to get them there, right?
Yeah.
And you have to go through all of the evolution of that. And, triathlon really is a journey. It can be this amazing journey where, yeah, the races are great. And I think we saw this in COVID, where everybody was locked down, races were canceled, and people were asking me as a coach, Mark Allen coaching, they go, I don't know why I should keep training. And I say, the reason you should keep training is because this is good for your health. this is keeping you healthy. It's keeping you calm. It's helping reduce your stress. It's giving you at least one thing a day where you're doing something positive for yourself.
It's your moment. It's your moment to relax.
You can let go of your problems.
Yes.
You can just breathe. And when you move your body as a human being, you feel so much better. And so I think COVID actually taught a lot of athletes that they thought that racing was what was most important, but they're realizing now that it's that journey that's most important.
Yeah, I hope so. Wagner always talks about people who question him as to why they should keep training now in COVID, right? Without the races. And he was like, why do you want to do triathlons? It's a lifestyle. I mean, it doesn't matter if you have a race or if you don't. I mean, it's just a brick by brick. You're building something. When the race comes, you'll get there better than if you weren't training. I think sometimes people just want to, now there's a race. Now I'm going to train. And then after the race, they like, oh, okay, I did that race. So, but back to your Ironmans and your training and everything. So we said you went back home 6 times thinking, next year I'm going to win. Next year I'm going to win. Next year I'm going to win. We talked about your mental aspect, what you changed about that. And what did you change on your training, like your training strategy? I've heard that was Phil Maffetone's hard training method like the game changer for your career or not? And how did you start with that method? Do you still use it? Do you still go by heart rate or?
Yeah, I started, I was introduced to Phil Maffetone about a year and a half into my career. And you have to understand, I came from a swimming background, as I said. And as a swimmer, the coach would throw us in the swimming pool, give us as hard a workout as they could think of. We'd go as hard as we could, and we'd come back the next day and do the same thing. So everything was anaerobic. And it was hard. And I think that's actually one of the reasons why I did not do well as a swimmer, because I really tried to go hard every workout. Interestingly, the people that I swam against that sometimes were a little lazy and went easier, they were the ones that actually did better because they were actually doing some aerobic training. But anyway, so when I got into, when I started doing triathlons, I just brought that mentality into cycling and running. And so every day I would try and do a little bit of a workout that was really, really hard. And I got fit quickly, but at the same time, I saw that I wasn't consistent with my training because I'd get exhausted and tired and burned out and sometimes sick and sometimes, like my knees would start to hurt or an ankle or something, like little injury kind of feeling. And so finally, another triathlete introduced me to Phil and said, just listen to what he has to say, try it out for a while. It's very different than the style of training that you're used to doing, but it'll help you out. And so Phil took me to a running track and he strapped a heart rate monitor on me and he said, okay, what we're going to do is to find out how fast you can run aerobically. So at that time, I was about 25, 26. And he said, your maximum aerobic heart rate, meaning the heart rate where if you're training at that or lower, you're burning fat for fuel, it's aerobic. If you train above it, it's anaerobic and you're burning carbohydrate for fuel. And he said, the key thing here is that at or below your maximum aerobic heart rate, it's low stress physiologically on your body. You'll be able to come back day after day after day after day after your training, and you'll be able to actually do more volume. When you're training anaerobic, carbohydrate burning, that's high physiological stress on your body. And he said it doesn't necessarily relate to perceived effort. Like some people, their heart rate's super high and they say, oh, well, I can still keep talking. But physiologically, your body is reading it as high stress. So anyway, we went to the track. I timed a mile at 155 beats a minute, and it was over 3.5 minutes slower than I was trying to do in those little fast segments in my workouts. And I go, Phil, if I run this slow, I can't even beat guys that are twice my age. And he goes, don't worry about it. Just the next 6 weeks, train aerobically every day. Don't do any speed work. And you'll see that pace will start to get faster. Because each time you train aerobically, don't add in an anaerobic element, your body goes, okay, I need to develop more enzymes to break down fat for fuel, stored fat into energy, and you get more efficient and you start to be able to go faster and put out more power on your bike. And so at the end of those 6 weeks, I actually had a half Ironman distance race on another island in Hawaii called Kauai. And I just did one short speed workout in each of the 3 sports. This is after 6 weeks of aerobic training going really slow. My training partners hated me. They go, "You're always off the back in the workouts. You're not following anymore." And I go, "Well, I'm trying this new thing." And they thought, "You're nuts, right?"
Like 100% aerobic work during 6 weeks, no speed at all.
No. I mean, and you have to understand that my body was completely out of balance because I had done speed work basically in every workout that I did for a couple of years. And so I needed to really super correct that. And so anyway, I went to that race and I won. I beat all those guys who were laughing at me. And so I was like, there's something to this. And eventually I was able to get down to running a 5.5 minute mile aerobically. I don't know what that is in minutes per kilometer, but it's pretty darn fast. It's almost as fast as, it's basically the pace you would be going in a half Ironman distance race on the run, me anyway. And so I stayed with that. I did a lot of aerobic training. Certainly I did some anaerobic work. You need to do that to really round out all of your fitness and to really get everything to that ultimate highest level. But what it did is it kept me injury free. It kept me from getting sick, kept me from getting burned out. I was more consistent with training. I was more steady just in my mental state. And it basically enabled me to get faster year after year after year for 15 years. I continue to use that as the basic guide of how I train now also. But I'm not getting ready for races now. I'm just trying to live a long life and be healthy. So.
As a coach, do you use that training with your athletes?
I do. And some of them love it because they understand it. Others are coming to me from coaches who maybe have had them doing too much speed work. And so they're used to doing that. They think if I don't go hard as much as I did with this other coach, I'm not going to be fit. But I tell them, look, just because you can get your heart rate high doesn't mean you're going fast at that heart rate. And so some people I have to continually sort of keep on them and say, hey, your heart rate was 5-10 beats too high there. Next time, let's slow it down a little bit. And they go, nah, I'll be walking if I go that, if I do that heart rate. And I go, let me tell you a story. And so I launch into this story. And the story is that, each year after the season was over, I would decondition for about a month or two, where I didn't really do much training. I'd surf and I'd do fun stuff, but I didn't try to stay fit. And then January 1st, I would start back training. And so I had lost fitness. I'd lost a lot of my aerobic base. And so the first workouts that I would do had to be pretty slow to keep my heart rate from going really high. But I lived at the top of a hill. This was in San Diego. And so when my first official run back, I'd run down the hill. And of course, I can keep my heart rate low when I'm running down a hill. And then I'd run along the ocean there in San Diego, and my heart rate would start to get a little higher, and I have to slow down a little bit. And then when it was time to come back up the hill to go to my house, I had to walk to keep my heart rate from going above my maximum aerobic heart rate. So here I am, Ironman champion, walking the hill to get up to his house on his run. And, obviously as the months would go by, my fitness would come back. And then eventually I get to the point where I could sort of jog easy up that hill. I didn't have to walk. And then by the end of the season, I could actually go to, kind of actually look like I was running going up that same hill. And so it takes patience, but also people realize, wow, when I train like this, I don't feel exhausted all the time like I used to. I actually feel good when I'm done with workouts, and I feel I can get up the next day and train again. And so it just takes a little patience, but it really does work.
And do you, I'm just curious, do you use power or only heart rate, or did you ever use power when you were?
No.
Yeah, power meters.
Yeah, well, when I was training, power meters were just getting invented. So I actually never trained with one because it hadn't really come into the public yet. I wish I had one. For sure, I would have used it. And the way that I use it now is that I set all of my athletes that I coach, they have heart rate zones to follow. And then what I like them to do, and what I do, is track what their average pace is at that heart rate in a run, or what their average watts are at those heart rate zones on their bike. And as they gain more fitness, the power is going to go up at those same heart rates. The running pace is going to get quicker at those same heart rates. If you take heart rate out of it, and let's say you're cycling and you're just looking at your power, maybe 1 month on a 3-hour ride, you're pushing 160 watts. And then a month later on that same ride, maybe you're able to push 175 watts. If you're not measuring that against heart rate, you don't know if that gain is because you're more fit or because you're going harder. However, if you see that you go from 160 to 175 watts at an average heart rate of, say, 140 beats a minute, you know that is pure fitness gain. And if you don't see those gains happening, as a coach, then we have to go, I'll dialogue with the athlete and say, okay, what's holding back this progression that should be taking place? It usually has to do with either something with stress, they're not getting enough sleep, their job stress is very high, maybe their diet is too high in carbohydrate and they're not getting enough good fats and oils, just a number of things like that. And usually there's just like one thing that's holding back that fitness gain that should be taking place.
Going back to Kona, we have an interview with Bob Babbitt, and he told us about the Madame Pele curse, and he told that your mother took a few rocks from the island, and you were only able to win in '89 when she returned those rocks to the island. Is that true, or do you believe in this curse, or is this?
Or do you believe in your training?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, '89 there were a lot of things that came together that year that needed to be put in place, and fortunately, they all did. And that was actually one of the pieces. It was my stepmom, my dad's wife. We had actually gone to Hawaii on a vacation before I started triathlon, and she took a bunch of the pieces of lava. We didn't know about that tradition. It's sort of like if you take lava from the Big Island, it's like taking some of Pele's children, and she's not happy about that. And so, the light bulb sort of went off in her mind, and she brought that lava back that year and placed it back on the island. No, do I believe that? Absolutely. Is that a myth? No, it's something that's real. And that's just that's also what makes racing on the Big Island of Hawaii such a unique experience, because there's so many other levels of what's going on there. It's not just you and your power meter. It's you and your power meter, but also the energy of the island and the weather conditions and the competition. And I think it's the most complex triathlon to win. There's other races that might have harder courses. There's other events that are in hotter climates, but there's none that are as complex to win as the Ironman in Hawaii.
Well, now I have to ask. I wasn't going to ask, but now I have to. What do you think about Ironman moving the World Championship to St. George next year?
Well, I was actually just at St. George for Ironman 70.3 World Championships, and I had never been to St. George to see a competition, and so I didn't really know. I'd seen video of the place, and video of some of the races, and it looked pretty amazing, but I wasn't sure. But after being there, it's like, that is an amazing place to have a race. It'll be unique. It will be different. It's a very natural environment, like the Big Island of Hawaii. Very different, obviously. It's desert, big red rock mountains, rock formations, a little bit of altitude, not much, but a little bit. And so it'll be a very different event than the race is in Kona, but equally challenging. And I think what is going to be cool about it in the future is that those who look back and go, I did the Ironman World Championship when it was in St. George, they're going to have like the t-shirt and the trophy and all the stuff that only one race is going to have. That's going to be kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, I think so too. And I do believe it's an amazing place. I wish I could go there someday.
Do you believe that this is something that is going to happen only this year? We listen sometimes with the World Triathlon Corporation, and they're if they are thinking about doing like they do with the 70.3 worlds, like each year in different place, and Kona is going to be like a race in the calendar, or Kona is always going to be like there's like Wimbledon. It has to be in Wimbledon. You can do it in Wimbledon anywhere else. So for me, Kona is just like this. But I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I don't know what they'll do. Clearly, if you have that race anywhere else in the world, it's not the same race. That doesn't mean that it's any better or worse somewhere else, but it definitely is different. And I put the question out on some of my social media a week or two ago when we heard the announcement, and some people were like, yeah, if I was qualified, I'd go to St. George. I just want to do the race. And, we haven't raced in almost 2 years. So to do a race is awesome. Other people were like, you know what, if I have a slot, and I'm going to defer to October 2022, because they said I wasn't racing to qualify for the Ironman World Championship necessarily. I was racing to qualify for Kona. But I think I don't know if you can separate the two out, actually, because one of the things that makes Kona special also is that it has evolved into a race where everybody is at a high level. It's very competitive. You can go to an Ironman distance race in wherever, Coeur d'Alene or in Brazil or, you name it, somewhere in Germany. It's going to be a competitive race, but it's not as competitive as Hawaii. And that's another element that has become part of the history of that race, is that not only are you competing against yourself and competing in Hawaii, but you've got all these other athletes that are at such a high level. And I think that just raises it another level also. So if they had the World Championship somewhere else, and then they had an Ironman in Kona, it would still be an amazing race, but I don't think it would have the same feel as when it's the Ironman World Championship.
I think the same.
If I had qualified for Kona many times and World Championship was in St. George, I'd definitely do it in St. George and then qualify again and just do in Kona. But maybe for those who it's their first time racing, I think they for sure rather race in Kona. For the first time, but.
Yeah, and they're going to have 2 days of racing in Kona in October 2022. So that'll be interesting to have a Thursday Ironman and a Saturday Ironman, and it's like part one and part two of the whole event. The pro women Thursday, the pro men Saturday. The age groups split up between the 2 days. It's kind of a creative idea and a good way to enable all of the people who have qualified for Hawaii to actually be able to race.
I hope they keep that in the future and maybe give the women more slots, because it's always sad when we come to races and like, how many slots for the women? One for each age group. He has an athlete who like won third overall, second overall, and just
second in his age group.
Qualify because she was second in her age group all of those times. But anyways, that's a rant for another hour.
Yeah. Well, and it's going to be very hard for anybody to qualify this year, because like last year there were so few Ironman events that they put 200 slots in a race, and now this year a lot of the North American Ironmans, I think they have like 26 slots total.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
here,
it's going to be
here as well.
Like I could.
So, if you win your age group, you get to go this year. If not, it's probably better to just think about really dialing it here.
Yeah.
We have we have 10 athletes who are going to be racing in Cozumel, and they were like, should we go or should we not? Because it's just the first one that gets a chance. Well, anyway, I think Beto was about to ask you something. Sorry, I interrupted.
You remain very involved with the sport and actively participate in many of the sport's decisions and developments, with the development of the PTO, the Collins Cup, and also some of the initiatives like the Super League, with some of this being banked by venture capitals. And how do you see the sports changing for the professional triathletes in the upcoming years with these events and things like this?
I think it's great. It's like another level of innovation for the sport. And like what the PTO, Professional Triathletes Organization, is doing, is they're really highlighting that each of these pro triathletes Each one has a unique skill, a unique talent, a unique personality. And they're building those personalities. So it's like, oh, I kind of like this guy, but I don't know if I like that one, but somebody else is going to go, no, I like that guy. This first guy, forget him. And so I just think they're doing a great job of elevating kind of like the legendary status of these athletes. And, for us, it becomes sort of ordinary, like, oh yeah, I did another half Ironman. Well, that's a big deal. Or I won Ironman in Coeur d'Alene. That's a big deal. But in our sport, I think without those personalities and you pulling for somebody, sometimes achievements get under, the PTO is trying to elevate and get people to understand how big of an achievement it is to get ready for a triathlon. And to do it also in a way like they did with the Collins Cup, where you create a real entertainment value to watching the competition, so that even if you never do a triathlon in your life, you want to watch it because it's just really exciting to watch. And so those two things are really valuable. They're going to elevate, ultimately, like the professional triathletes or PTO, what they want to do is to have it so that when a pro man or woman gets on an airplane, there's 10 people asking them for their autograph, and when that happens, it's going to be like, it'll help all of the sport, because better, more money will come in terms of sponsorship, which enables race directors to put on events with a higher level of experience for the athletes. Yeah, I think it's an exciting time because of all of the innovation that's going on.
We always say here in Brazil, we have something that I don't know if it happens in the United States too, but we have like age groupers races, a race that is only for age groups. There are no professional athletes in these races, like even in the Ironman. So, and we always say here that the professionals are the idols of the sport. They are the ones that make the sport great. Nobody like, I start doing triathlons because guys like yourself and Dave Scott and Scott Molina and Scott Tinley and Leandro Macedo, Alexandre Manzan, and these guys from Brazil and Oscar Galindez and people like this, and they are professional athletes. So without the professionals, the sport will die. And I think that this is the Collins Cup and the PTO is something that is really important for the sport in the future. And of course, right now, for us that like the sport. And another question that I want to know is, do you think that the Collins Cup, some way to try to do another Iron War, maybe with all these matchups, they are hoping that only one of them, like do like the three guys going for all the race together to the finish and a sprint finish, and it never happens. But do you think that is something like this?
Well, I think one of the ideas with that is that, if in a normal race, you have first, second, third place. Then after those three come across, everybody else kind of gets lost in the results. At the Collins Cup, you had 6 men's matchups, 6 women's matchups with 3 people in them. So you had 12 races in one day where you were cheering for first, second, and third. And not only that, but the way they set it up with the points, where you get a certain number of points for first, second, third to go to your team standings, but then also bonus points if you gained time advantages on the people who finished behind you. That made it so that even if somebody was in third place in their matchup, they were going as hard as they possibly could, because they didn't want to give up those bonus points to the people in front of them. And so maybe first and second had already come across, but you still want to know where third place is, because it's like, are they going to be close enough so that, first doesn't get those extra points, or are they going to be too far back and, the other guys are going to get the bonus points. So it made 12 amazing races all in one day, and each matchup was super exciting all the way until the third person crossed the line. I thought it was a great
No, we love it. I love it. I got it on TV all day long. Take my kids out of the Fortnite for the day and just got the TV for myself. And you're not allowed to play video games today. This is my TV, so you want to play in the other one? Go ahead.
Right.
Take the kids outside. You go outside today.
You can watch triathlon if you want.
Yes. And another question that I'd like to ask you is, you talk about power meters and heart rate, and do you believe that a race like the Iron War will be possible today in like with all the technology, with all the controlling the athletes have?
Yeah, because ultimately in a race even with all your power meters and heart rate monitors and everything, you at some point you shift into, hopefully, and especially if you need to, you shift into a way of racing that goes beyond the numbers, where you're able to do something that nothing in your training would say you're able to do. And of course, once you do it in the race, you can look back and go, oh, well, it was this workout or that workout that showed that I had the capacity to do this. But you shift into a thing where it's like, you don't care about the numbers. You're just focused on trying to get it across the line ahead of somebody else. Yeah. It makes it harder, I think, because when we trained, we didn't have as many things to monitor what was going on inside. So we had to develop, I think, a more intuitive sense about our bodies and how we could pull more out. Today, everybody's looking at numbers and, fine tuning their training. Obviously, it's working. Look at somebody like Gustav Iden. He's super dialed into numbers with, the way they're training in Norway, and Christian Blumenfeld. But at the same time, there's a human element that maybe doesn't get worked on as much when you can just keep looking at this and go, okay, yeah, that's good.
We always say, we like the metrics, we like the numbers, but don't get stuck to the numbers, because otherwise you forget to understand how you're feeling and what are your perceptions and all that. But Beto, I think we're coming to a close, huh? I think we're coming to an end of our program. But before we do that, I know you've been to Greg Bennett's podcasts more than once, and he usually asks his guests a couple of questions at the end, like, would you like to mow the lawn or vacuum the house or something like that? He does those questions.
Yeah.
But here in our podcast, we don't do that, but we do ask our guests to share one of their embarrassing moments during a race or during training. We call this our bonking hour. So feel free to take a minute and think about a funny incident or something you did that you'd like to share with us for a laugh.
Oh, geez. Funny incident or something that happened. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Some of the most funny incidences were just times in training when you're with your training partners and you're out there and none of you are feeling good. And sometimes we'd start out on a workout and we're world-class folks, right? And we can barely run because we're so tired, and we just start laughing in the middle of the street, like, look at us, we can't even run right now. And
let's just stop at the end of the street and grab a Coke and get back home.
Stop at the street, grab a Coke, go back home. We'd make it through the workout, but there were some times where we'd just look at each other and like, what are we doing? We're stupid. We should be having our feet up. Whose idea was it for this workout anyway? And when I started in the sport in 1982, everybody who was trying to win races. We were serious, but at the same time, we were just exploring. We felt like pioneers. And so when the race was done, we all got together and we'd go have a beer together and have a dinner together and just really enjoy the camaraderie of it. And for a lot of us, it was the first time we'd had the opportunity to travel internationally. And that was such an amazing thing. And, if I look back at my career, I had great races, but some of the stuff that I valued most was meeting people in different countries and just seeing that we might have been brought up differently. We might have different belief systems. The way we have to manage our lives is different, but we have this thing in common called triathlon. And it just bound us together. And it was like a language that didn't have words. You go on a training, like I was in Argentina one time just for some appearances, and a lot of the local triathletes got together and they took me on a ride out in the countryside. And, a lot of them couldn't speak English. I could make by a little bit in Spanish, but it was just amazing to just be out there in the middle of this beautiful landscape and this beautiful countryside and just sharing this time with these guys that no way in a million years would I have ever met any of them if I was traveling on my own. And so triathlon is it's an entry point into something common that we all have, where we have a dream, we challenge ourselves, we say, let me see if I can do this race, let me see if I can finish an Ironman, finish a half Ironman distance race. You're out there and you all know that it doesn't matter what language you speak, it doesn't matter if you're big or small, a man or a woman, doesn't matter, nothing matters. It's just you, the course, and this great community that's out there supporting you to do it. And those are some of the most precious moments I have, and things that I reflect back and think I was so lucky to have that opportunity.
Oh, that's amazing. Greg Bennett said the same in here. He said that this remember when moments, and he talked about the moment and finished the race and with a beer and a burger in hand and talk with the friends, the what ifs and about the what ifs. And this is the best thing in sports, and I agree with this. And
my best thing was the churrasco.
Yeah.
Like a barbecue there.
Yeah, churrasco.
We're going to have to ask you to come to Brazil to have a
when you come to Brazil, we're going to do a churrasco. Yeah, churrasco.
Well, that's where I was introduced to it, so.
Yeah. And another feature that we have here, we always end the program with some we call the idols, the triathlon idols, and we like to know if you're an idol for most of the guys that are listening to the podcast, and I want to know that you have an idol for yourself in the triathlon, on sports, and in general.
In life.
Yeah, when I was competing, there was one moment. It was in the LA Olympics when Carlos Lopes won the marathon from Portugal, and he was 37 or 38. I can't remember, something like that, when he won it. And he had actually, I think, set a record in the 10K earlier that year, something along those lines. Anyway, and I was young at that point. Let's see, I was in my 20s. And that was the point where something went off in my brain that said, you know what, I might be able to do this for a long time. Because when I was a swimmer growing up, you graduated college and then you were done. That was it. That was the peak of your fitness career. And then it was all downhill. Well, here I was, at 24, all of a sudden in triathlon and getting even more fit than I was as a swimmer. And then I saw Carlos Lopes win the gold medal in the marathon. And I'm like, I want to see if I can carry this a little bit longer and maybe break down some age barriers. And if I take care of myself, maybe go longer than it looks like normally you would think people could. And of course, now we're seeing that played out even more, like with Jan Frodeno at the, Tri Battle Royale, 40-year-old going under 7:30 for an iron distance event. 20 years ago, people would have said that's impossible. So it's just fun to sort of feel like, the successes you see today are built on the experiences that some of us in the past put in place. Like we showed how you can get to this point, and then the athletes after us took that and said, okay, let me take that and see if I can go to the next point, and then the next point, and the next point. And then you have like a Jan Frodeno doing what he did there, and you have Craig Alexander winning at Ironman at 38, and then Jan winning at, I think, just slightly older than Craig was. And yeah, it's just really cool to be a part of that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I have to agree. Well, Beto, do you want to close up?
Before we wrap up, what tip do you have to all the athletes that are seeking for a result for some time, for a long time, and it seems impossible, and it's just for those, and they think that they never achieve, and for those who are starting the sport, the same. Do you have any tips for them?
Well, no matter where you are in the sport, the main thing is just to enjoy it, to have it be something that adds to your quality of life, adds to your physical health, adds to your stress relief, just makes you feel better and gives you something that maybe has a different purpose than making money or, some of the normal stuff that we think about. And to just use it to make yourself a better person, have a better experience in life, and then also to, maybe find some friends that you never would have gotten to know otherwise, like I have been able to.
Nice. Well, we would like to immensely thank you for your participation and your time dedicated to us, to our podcast, and say again that it was an honor to have you here with us, and we hope you come to Brazil someday when you can do a churrasco together and
all right,
chat again in person. So
all right,
thank you
sounds
very
great.
much.
Hope to see you all down in Brazil at some point soon. Good luck,
or
everybody.
In Kona.
Or in Kona, yeah, even better, huh?
Yeah, we're trying to get Beto to Kona. So
Yeah.
hashtag Beto in Kona.
Okay.
If people want to reach out to you, Mark, where can they do that? Instagram, Facebook, where are you at?
Yeah, Instagram is Mark Allen Grip, GRIP. I'm on Facebook, Mark Allen Coaching. There's a couple of them on there, but look for the one with the most people following it, and then markallencoaching.com for anybody who's interested in looking into my coaching. And then I also do a number of other things. You know, I wrote a book called Fit Soul, Fit Body: 9 Keys to a Healthier, Happier You with Brant Secunda, and we teach workshops periodically throughout the year. It's a great way to sort of work on both that physical aspect of who you are, but also that mental aspect of who you are, and to really give yourself a reset of, especially right now after COVID, a lot of people are saying, okay, I need to step back for a second and ask myself what's important and how can I move forward in my life. And we just actually had a workshop last weekend here in Santa Cruz, and people were like, this is exactly what I needed right now. So you can check that out, fitsoulfitbody.com.
Great. Awesome. Guys, we'll have the links to all of the Mark Allen stuff on our description box. Again, Mark, thank you so much for being with us and for accepting our invitation. And we'll hope to see you in person soon.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thanks for having me on, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Take care.
Café com Tri, a sua dose de triatlon.
Pega o seu café e vem com a gente.